the passive. What is the passive? Let's have a little look at these two sentences. First one. La bonne fait les lits. The maid makes the beds. How I wish. 2. Les lits sont faits par la bonne. The beds are made by the maid. Sentence 1 is active because the subject, the maid, is doing the action. Sentence 2 is what we call passive because the subject, the beds, aren't doing anything. They're just sitting there passively and letting themselves be made. The maid is doing the action of making, so she's called the agent. So how do we form it? To make an active sentence passive, we make the direct object of the active sentence the subject of the passive sentence. That means, for example, the maid makes the beds. The beds were the direct object. They were the direct object of the making action, just lying there being made. They now become the subject. Okay? The beds. We use the corresponding tense of the verb être. So we must make être agree with the beds, and it must be in the same tense. Present tense in this instance. The beds are. Then we make the verb of the active sentence into a past participle. The maid makes the bed. That was present tense of the verb to make. So now we use the past participle. Made. The beds are made. The passive operates in French the same as it does in English. And then we make the subject of the active sentence into an agent by using par la bonne, by the maid. Okay, to phrase it another way, look at the verb in the original sentence. For example, le chat mange la souris. The cat eats the mouse. Let's look at that verb, mange. It's in the present tense. So we need to conjugate être in the same tense. In this instance, it's the present tense. So la souris, which was the direct object, now becomes the subject, la souris. Let's make être agree with la souris in the present tense, est. We then add the past participle of the original verb, which was manger. La souris est mangée. Note there that we have an agreement there. Manger has an E because la souris is feminine. And it needs to agree with it because we have être. It's acting like an adjective, in fact. We'll get to that. Then we add par plus the agent if necessary. You don't need to know who the action is done by in every passive sentence, but if you do, you add par plus the original subject of the active sentence. So the whole sentence would be la souris est mangée par le chat. How do we form it? Let's have a look. Les soldats cherchent le fugitif. Cherche is the present tense of chercher. So we need to use the present tense of être. Le fugitif est, and then chercher is the past participle of chercher. Le fugitif est cherché, and then we have our agent, par les soldats. Le garçon a mangé les tartes. A manger is the passé composé. So we need to put être in the passé composé. Les tartes ont été mangées. Now note here, ont été is the passé composé of être. It agrees with les tartes because they are now the subject, so that's why it's ont. We know that être takes avoir as its auxiliary verb, so it's ont été. Then we add the past participle of the original verb, which is manger. Manger. Ont été mangés par le garçon. Okay. Note again that the past participle manger is an adjective now and must agree with the subject les tartes. It just means we have être there, manger must agree with les tartes. Just as when you have any verb in the passé composé that takes être, that also needs to agree as well. Some people get a bit confused because they're looking at it and thinking, oh, there's too many past participles there. Don't think of it like that. Think of it, here's passé composé of être, done that. Now I'm adding a past participle here. Think of them in two separate areas, and it all makes sense. Believe me. Use. The passive is not used as often in French as it is in English. We use it a lot. The French will find many ways to avoid using the passive. They often prefer an active sentence to a passive sentence, especially if the agent is known. So here are some ways to avoid it. Now that you know how to do it, here's how not to use it. If no agent is mentioned, but the action has obviously done by a person, you can use on. Someone's done it. We don't know who it is, but someone, obviously, as the subject of the active sentence. For example, les enfants ont été grondés. The children were scolded. Well, we're assuming that it was a person that scolded them rather than a thing. We can say, on a grondé les enfants. You know, someone scolded them. In English, it sounds most natural for us to say the children were scolded, but on a grondé les enfants sounds natural in French. Also, some other examples here. On a dit à Paul d'attendre. Someone told Paul to wait. We don't know who it was. Paul was told to wait. On vous enverra votre passeport. Your passport will be sent to you. Someone will send it. I'm not going to let you know who it is. Just cross your fingers. Okay. Here's another way to avoid using the passive. Make the verb reflexive. And the French use this a lot. These examples are typical of what happens. Le pâté se vend chez le charcutier. Pâté is sold at the delicatessen. Pâté sells itself. Well, if it's that good, it probably does. Le pain se vend par là. Bread is sold over there. You will see that very often. L'argot s'emploie de plus en plus. Slang is used more and more. Literally, slang employs itself. Yeah? It's used more and more. This sounds natural in French. And le français se parle partout. French speaks itself everywhere. French is spoken everywhere. French is spoken. Le français se parle. Tenses. The passive is used in as many tenses as the active. So all those tenses that you know and love in normal active sentences, these tenses can exist in the passive as well. They look just like the active sentences. It's just that you have added on to that the past participle of the original verb from the active sentence. I'll show you what I mean. Okay. Present tense. La maison est construite. The house is built. Et present tense of être plus the past participle. Note again that construite is it's a past participle of construire. It's agreeing with la maison. That's why we have the E on the end. L'imparfait. La maison était construite. The house was built. Était is in the imperfect plus past participle. Futur. La maison sera construite. The house will be built. Conditional. La maison serait construite. The house would be built. Just as in English, we've got these forms of être plus the past participle. Passé simple. La maison fut construite. The house was built. Perfect. La maison a été construite. The house has been built. Pluperfect. La maison avait été construite. The house had been built. You know that with a pluperfect, it's formed by the imperfect of the auxiliary verb plus the past participle. We know that être takes avoir, so it's avait été plus past participle of the active verb construite. Future perfect. La maison aura été construite. The house will have been built. Again, the future perfect, the future of the auxiliary, aura, perfect été, aura été. We have the past participle, and then we have the past participle of the original verb. La maison aura été construite. Conditional perfect, in the same way, la maison aurait été construite. The house would have been built. Conditional perfect is the conditional of the auxiliary plus the past participle, aurait été for être, and then construite being the past participle. Simple. So that is the passive. Merci et à la prochaine fois.